welcome back to Just One Question. I'm Nick Morgan. It's a great pleasure to have with me today a fixture, a giant, an amazing man in the Boston musical scene, David Snead. David has been president and CEO of the Handel and Haydn Society since 2015. He came to Handel and Haydn from the New York Philharmonic, where he was Vice President of Marketing, Brand, and Customer Experience. That's a mouthful, but I'm sure it was important, and he did that for 14 years. Before that, he ran marketing programs for the Pittsburgh Symphony, the Minnesota Orchestra, and the Guthrie Theatre. So who better to talk to us about the effect this pandemic is having on the arts? And so we'll get to the question in just a second. But first of all, David, please check in with us. Tell us how you're doing. How's it going? Before this, I learned that you were actually in Boston today and seeing an empty city. So how are you doing, and what is that like?
Well, first of all, thank you, Nick, for inviting me to speak with you today. Yeah, it is true. I'm in my office for the second time since March 12th, I guess. And obviously we're shut down. We have people in once or twice a week to get the mail and all of that. But it's been amazing how quickly and easily we've been able to adapt to working remotely. And I think taking advantage of that medium, there's an intimacy to being able to talk to somebody on a screen, that actually I wasn't expecting. And so I think it's actually, H&H is actually weathering this okay. I mean, I'm looking at, here's my calendar behind me, and usually it's full of things, and it's empty. So there's that, but there's actually a lot going on with us, and we're getting through this okay.
Great. I'm glad to hear that. Handel and Haydn Society is a gem in Boston, and we're all of us who love music hope that you do okay. But let's get to the question, the just one question. We've been in this pandemic long enough now. Here we are heading toward the end of the summer, where it's become strangely familiar, weirdly and horribly familiar. And so that's long enough to kind of take stock a bit and ask ourselves, what's working in this new virtual world that we try to work and live in, and what's not working? And I'm asking that question with an eye, of course, to the future. When we do go back to whatever the new normal becomes, what are you going to keep and what are you going to jettison? And I'm particularly interested to hear your answer because, of course, the arts are so important in times of stress and when humanity is suffering, to create meaning and understanding and moral and emotional sustenance. And so we want to know what is working for you in the Handel and Haydn Society and what is not.
Well, I think actually the answer is kind of in the question. I think when you're facing a situation, as all of us are in the performing arts, where your ability to perform is suddenly taken away, cut off, moment's notice, it really helps to have a very good vision and sense of why you're here in the first place. What your mission is, what you want to achieve, what your purpose, what you want to accomplish. And I think the thing for us was to recognize that, yes, we do concerts, obviously, but the performance of music is not an end in itself. Performance of music is in service of a greater goal, which is to move people, to inspire people, to lift them up, to engage with them, to provoke, to touch them in some way. And so the question for us became, okay, we can't do that live. What do we do instead? And so it really inspired a lot of creativity, I think, on the part of the musicians and the team to think about, okay, how do we do this? How do we stay true to what we're delivering? And how do we stay true to our brand and our mission in this new way? Mm-hmm. I think also one of the keys of H&H's strategy as an organization is really about connection. I think that we really strive hard to have a strong connection with our audiences, to make them feel like they're part of the organization, and to really create a strong bond with them. And how do we keep that going? And how can we actually take advantage of this medium to build on it? But one of the early things, obviously, was musicians who came to us and they said, we really miss performing. And even though we can't have an audience, we can still play music, we can still perform. So we started doing a series, as many of my colleagues have been, of musicians performing at home. Very intimate way. You got to meet them, you got to talk to them. We really focused on our sort of musician at home videos. And it wasn't just about playing a piece of music, it's about engaging. So you'd see our principal cello talk to you about the piece. He's in his living room. It's very casual, very intimate. And that created a different kind of connection with audiences than we had before. You come to Symphony Hall, you're there with 2,600 people. You see, 30 to 70, in the case of H&H concerts, musicians on stage, and you appreciate that experience, but you don't have the one-to-one. Actually, in this medium, there was an opportunity, as we're doing right now, to have a one-to-one connection with our musicians. And then we started building from there, and when it came time to be safe to do larger kinds of experiences, we started doing that. We started doing Q&As between our audience and our donors and our artistic director and our musicians and our creative staff. It allowed people to, engage with them and ask questions and talk with them in a way that didn't happen before. So I think there's a whole other dimension to how we serve our mission and how we serve our audience that didn't exist before. And we're absolutely going to carry that forward when we get back on stage, even if it's just in streaming of concerts, which will probably be the first stage for us. We hope sometime this fall to get the orchestra back together and start doing some concerts. And then we're going to have around that some Q&A with the musicians, an intro perhaps from the artistic director, all those kinds of things that we can't do in a formal concert that you can do now. We're doing this during the Democratic National Convention, and I've kind of noticed that regardless of your politics, they've really thought, how do I turn this into a television experience and not just a convention? So same thing. We can engage with people through this medium all around the world, actually. Another example is our education program. We have a 230 person, we have 230 students in our choral program, 7 choruses, and heretofore they've gathered at Boston Latin School on Saturday mornings to rehearse. That's all moved online. We had a conversation about, should we suspend education during this period? We said, no, this is actually at this time the one best evidence of why H&H matters. So how do we make it work in this situation? Well, obviously, we provide online instruction. And the side benefit of this was that people all over the world could sign up and join. And so we have students from around the US that are in our education program now that we didn't have before. So I think that that's going to remain. One big thing we're talking today as we are trying to figure out what we're going to do about Messiah this year. H&H has done Messiah every year for 165 years.
Good heavens.
Have been around for 215 consecutive years. Oldest performing arts organization in the country. And, I know you're a singer, so how do you do that piece when singing itself is dangerous these days? Recommendations that you should sing wearing a mask, you should social distance. Can we do all that and do a Messiah for Boston this November that I think could really bring the community together? And we're trying to figure that out. So every concert now is this exercise of how can you make it happen given all the limitations we have. Also, how can you take advantage of the opportunities of the digital medium to add something different to the experience? So it's a very exciting time, actually, I have to say, as a person who runs an arts organization, to be forced to think about everything differently as we are now. And I personally find it a pretty neat time because H&H is going to be coming out of this doing things differently, as we just discussed. That that'll be good for everybody. I think if you ask about what's not working, the key big thing is the effect this is having on the musicians.
Yeah.
The artists and musicians who could no longer perform. Financially, it's huge.
Mm-hmm.
Also, just emotionally, it's their reason for existence has been taken away. Mm. So we're really spending a lot of time thinking about how we can help with that. Our board, back in the spring, when we had to cancel the rest of our season, they contributed the money to pay them for the lost revenue, which was fantastic. And for musicians this year, as long as this goes on, who end up not being able to perform with us because of the pandemic, we're going to compensate them at 50% of their normal salaries, which we hope helps. Mm-hmm. It's what we can do. So that's a part that's a big concern of ours. And then, of course, keeping the audience connection. Mm-hmm. So in an interesting way, it's a really inspiring time for us in an odd way. Yeah.
What a wonderful answer. And I love the hope in it, and I love the courage in it. And I have to say that I was particularly touched when you made that announcement earlier in the spring that you were going to compensate the musicians for their time, because some arts organizations joined you and other great ones, and some didn't. And as you point out, it's just made a huge difference to the musicians who were able to get some help.
Well, can I talk for a second, Nick, about the business model, because that affects that. We are about 25% of our revenue comes from ticket sales. Mm-hmm. The rest of it comes from philanthropy. And that's what allows us to keep the prices what they are. And when this came along and we lost ticket revenue, it wasn't as big a hit on us, to be totally candid, as it did on organizations like Broadway, who are totally dependent upon ticket revenue. Right. So because of our philanthropic support, the fact that our donors had created an endowment a few years ago that's large enough to get us through this, that's given us the ability to do what you just said, compensate the musicians and keep the doors open. Hmm. So it's this philanthropic support. Actually, of course, next year, we sold all the tickets for the coming season that we're ever going to sell. Hmm. Already, assuming there'll be a social distancing capacity, we have no additional seats to sell. So the rest of the season is all about philanthropy. Hmm. Unfortunately, H&H has great support.
Fantastic. Well, a real gem on the Boston scene, and I really appreciate your time and your answer. And let's hope we can all gather again in Symphony Hall and enjoy a live concert and a full season. But thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Nick, very much.